skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and love. Good, good, good morning, sun. Good morning, good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and love. Good, good morning, sun. Good morning, light. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and love. Good morning, sun. Good morning, sun. Good morning, light. Good morning, sun. How are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and in love. Good morning, sun.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of I Need Coffee. How do you like my new headset? I'm told this is the best headset for gaming, and all the cool gamers use this. So, since I'm a terrible gamer, I figured that this is something that I need in order to improve my gaming skills, and it comes with a fancy pink microphone. Look at that. I mean, I think it looks pretty sharp. Look at that. Ears. I don't know if they light up. I need to test it, but I think it looks pretty good. So I have a bet that, well, yeah, I don't have high hopes for these things. As to the quality, it may look fun and all, but I don't know how good they sound. I will let my daughter be the judge of that. So, yeah, today I'd like to talk about BC version tracking, AI for AL, vacation, and the remote work challenges that come with trying to take a long vacation. And let me fix this. So, with that, okay. So back in June 15th, a little over a month ago, I asked the question, basically, as new BC releases come out publicly in the SaaS platform, how much time does an app developer have before, like, they have access to the version in a Docker container until that version gets released in the SaaS environment in production? So if I'm a developer who's developed PTEs or an app source app, if I'm just working with the standard publicly available Docker containers, BC Docker containers or images, how long before, let's say I get a new BC version, let's say 18.3 on July 1st, and that downloads to my Docker server, how long until that 18.3 release might show up in production? Is that a month, 2 months, 2 weeks? Like, what is that window? And is that sufficient to test and maintain PTEs? Or do you really, is it essential that you participate in the BC Insider program to get the new BC versions via Docker as soon as possible to extend that lead time? Like if it's 3 months on average, it could be 1 month, it could be 4 months. But if it's 3 months on average, is that enough to maintain PTEs in AppSource apps? Or, and like, I know there's a right answer, but I'm just wondering, just casually, if you're not too serious about it or doing internal development, whatever the case is the standard container enough for the latest release? Or do you really, really need to participate in the BC Insider program in order to give yourself sufficient lead time in order to deal with, say, a breaking change? And there are lots of other ancillary issues and clues and warnings and things that'll show up that you can figure out. But just in terms of BC Docker containers and images, this is just my general question. Like, how far in advance are we seeing these releases? So I asked this question, got some feedback, but I don't think anyone really knew. So I said, okay, let's collect some data and try to make an informed assessment of this. So I modified my PowerShell script that I use to automatically update my BC Docker containers every morning. So every single morning, my script deletes, removes my BC Docker containers on my server and recreates them. It downloads the latest BC image that is publicly available, and it creates new containers. So I said, well, since I'm doing this anyway, let me modify that script to log the old version and the new version. So here you will see a highlighted line that on July 3rd, that was the first morning at 6:45 a.m. Pacific time. That was the first morning when my BC Docker containers went from version 18.2 to 18.3. So now I have this whole history. Every single day, I see which build I downloaded as part of this automated script. So the first day that I saw an 18.3 release was on July 3rd in the morning. And it went from 18.2 26217 to 18.3 27240. And now looking at this, it's interesting to see that the 18.2, 18.3, those are kind of like, I won't say arbitrary, but those are just, arbitrary release labels to increment the version. So I say that because previously you see 18.2.26217. And you notice that 26217 number is fairly consistent with the 18.2 release. And there are build numbers at the end there. And then when we go to 18.3, it jumps to 27240. So 18.2, 18.3, really I'm seeing the activity is in the 27240. There's kind of a big jump in that version number. Now, I said, okay, let's look at my current tenant, my current BC tenant that I'm using as a reference for what version is publicly available. And you'll notice here, 18.3 27240, which corresponds to this version number we see here, 27240, 27381. Now, what's interesting about that is that 27381 is a build that is earlier than my BC container image from the first time I was able to pull it down publicly. And that is not necessarily, that specific number isn't necessarily meaningful or valuable, but the internal build numbers at the very end there, those final granular build numbers are incrementing very quickly. And so the first one I got was 27555 as of 6:45 a.m. Pacific time. And those those last build numbers may be incrementing very quickly. But I see in production 27381 is earlier than what I got on July 3rd. So anyway, the major concern here is July 3rd was the first time I saw that version number 18.3 and the latest publicly available Docker container. So then the question is, okay, that's great. Now we know when that Docker container version was available. When was this 18.3 available in production? So that's the second date that we need to look at. So Now, I haven't been tracking that independently. I don't have a script or any mechanism to retrieve when different BC versions were released. However, it might be a future project I work on. However, I do have the email notifications for upgrades from Business Central. So I looked through my email and I found that on July 9th, just 6 days after I logged 18.3 in my BC container log, on July 9th, I received the notification that 18.3 would start to roll out as early as July 16th. So July 3rd is the first clue we have as the 18.3 designation. July 9th, just 6 days later, we get the email notification of the pending upgrade. And 13 days later is when the window opens to start upgrading. So in this particular example, there is only a 13-day minimum window that I would have to update a PTE or AppSource app extension if I were not participating in BC Insider. That's not a lot of time. If you only have one PTE, if you only have one AppSource, well, if you only have one or two PTEs, this is internal, maybe you could get by with this. If you're on the ball, you're not on vacation at the time, like I was at this time, you have 13 days. That's not unreasonable, but I wouldn't want to rely upon a 13-day window to upgrade business critical PTEs. I think that's too short. 2 weeks, yeah. Now you could say, well, customers could push that window. Well, that requires you to notify customers or to manage your BC Admin Center and push out those updates or your BC upgrade. And the last day to apply the update is July 30th. So your maximum window is 27 days. I don't think that's enough. So just an interesting data point. Let's say the minimum window is 13 days. In this case, the maximum window was 27. That gives you a 2-week way to stretch, so to speak. So not a lot of time. So that answered my first question. It's like, okay, the latest BC image, the publicly available image, that's fine for testing. Not enough time, in my opinion, if you have PTEs and especially if you have AppSource extensions, just not practical. And in my case, I scheduled my BC update on the first day it was available. So Friday, July 16th in the morning, I was on vacation. It updated at 11:35 a.m. UTC. I got the notification at 4:36 a.m. Pacific time, it looks like. So things happen fast in the BC SaaS world. So you'll want as much notification as possible. So how do we make that happen? Well, I don't know what the requirements are. I think you have to, I won't even say, I don't know if you have to be a partner because this is Partner Center. So you have to sign up and have some status in order to go participate in this program. But aka.ms/collaborate. That will take you to the page, I believe, where it'll redirect you to Partner Center is what it looks like. And you request permission or access to the BC Insider or Ready for Dynamics 365 Business Central program. And that will get you the license key to download the Insider versions of the BC images for Docker. And that gives you some lead time, which I'll mention next. And now I have finally set this up as a scheduled task. So now I am going to start logging the versions that I'm pulling down from Insider to see how much more lead time that gives me. So rather than 13 days, does that go to 4 weeks, 6 weeks? Like how much earlier will I see an 18.3 or 18.4 as part of Insider versus the publicly available latest build? Now, Is that going to be significantly more? I don't know. 6 weeks, 8 weeks, what's an acceptable time period for that? I would hope it's more than a month. I feel fairly comfortable with more than a month that you could, in theory, deal with that. But if you're an app source, remember, you've got to find the issues, potential problems, potential deprecated features, produce a new build, submit it through the approval program, get it published in App Source, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I'm new to that, so I'm still learning like what that process takes. If you make a mistake or if something's missing and you get rejected and you have to go remediate that, how long does that take? I don't know if, I suspect 4 weeks is plenty, but Microsoft has a increasing number of apps they're having to deal with. So if you are doing something in your new release that gets rejected either through the automated test or manual review, it takes time. So the more time you have, the better. So anyway, I'm now monitoring that with a script every morning at 7:30. I'm going to be monitoring and logging which new versions are coming down through BC Insider so I can compare that to production. And when 18.4 comes around, well, I'll see what version is available through Insider. Maybe it's 19.0 already. So maybe it's loads of time. But I'm curious for 18.3, 18.4, whatever those releases. And then when we go to 19.0, 19.1, what is that lead time? So I don't know how much, maybe there's a difference between the minor update lead time, like wave 1, wave 2, and the major update, 18.3 to 19.0, something like that. So anyway, I'm learning. Also, while on vacation, I got this notification. I said, okay, normally it's successful, but on the 17th, I got an error that my BC container failed to build. And yeah, maybe it was the prior day that it initially failed. I just grabbed this screenshot. So it's definitely continued to fail on the 17th. And just says Docker build failed with exit code 1 and the error text is blank. So it's like, okay, what's going on here? So I looked at the attached, I always attach the full log file to these email notifications. So I was able to just pull this up on my phone and look at this. Importing Cronus license file, your program license has expired. So maybe I knew this before, but I'd forgotten about it. Apparently, when your FLF license file expires, that causes the BC container build process through BC Container Helper. It causes that build process to fail. Okay. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of any way to automatically recreate your license file. You have to do that manually through Partner Source. So once you create that file, download it, you got to save it and make it available to your build script. So it's a manual process, and I think it's every 90 days. So kind of annoying. Wish there was a way to automate it, but yeah. So that was a good reminder that your containers can fail due to an expired license file. And in my case, these are just my dev containers, but it affects my dev containers, my insider containers. What if you have Azure DevOps pipelines that have build agents? This license file can affect a lot of things and have some cascading effects. So, yeah, I don't know if there's a way. There's probably a way for me to use a PowerShell script to look in the license file, read the expiration date, also check for this error message in the build process to give myself some notification. I do have it on my calendar to update and regenerate the license file, but I was on vacation, right? So yeah, something to think about for maintaining your Docker containers, maintaining your DevOps pipelines and build agents. I'll open the suggestions if someone has a better way of managing this, because this like throws a wrench in the entire process and holds up everything until someone fixes it manually. So that was interesting to learn. On another note, I saw this tweet by James Pearson this morning on GitHub Copilot for AL. I was like, what's GitHub Copilot? Maybe I'd read about it, but it didn't ring a bell. So I had to go look it up. And I looked it up, and it is a new feature of GitHub where, like, think of it as intelligent autocomplete, where instead of just completing a line, it'll actually flow in entire sections or snippets automatically, basically anticipating what you're going to type. So if I create a new local procedure in AL, as soon as I type that, it'll know, oh, maybe you want these 10 lines to fill in automatically to fill that out like a snippet. That's my impression of it. And if you're familiar with like Gmail's autocomplete, it's kind of that concept. As you're typing, it'll show you what it thinks you might want to type after that. So I looked this up. I was like, oh, I'm interested in learning more. And Luke saw that and he's like, well, haven't you seen Dimitri's tweets on this? And no, I was on vacation. So I wasn't monitoring my BC, my main Twitter thread while on vacation. I was in vacation mode, so I missed it. So I had to go back, and I found Dimitri's tweets from July 8th, where he was testing GitHub Copilot. So it looks like after a little bit of training, it starts to understand what you want to do. So it looks pretty cool. And then I saw Josh's tweet here where he found that Dimitri had proposed a DynamicsCon session on this new feature. So interesting thread. I learned a lot of stuff from this. So go check out Dimitri's DynamicsCon session. And if you weren't aware, you can vote on all the DynamicsCon sessions. This is a community sourced or community conference where all of the attendees vote on which sessions they want to see. So check out Dimitri's session on GitHub Copilot. So very cool. So I'll be voting for Dimitri's session to learn more about how GitHub Copilot might work with the AL language, because I will take all the help I can get when it comes to AL programming. Okay, so vacation withdrawal. Wow, it is real. So 4th of July was kind of when vacation started. And what day of the week was that? That was like 4th of July was Sunday. So I spent Friday and Saturday preparing for 4th of July in the US, big holiday, of course. And that involved setting up our house for a party. I think we had like 15 or 20 people or something coming over. So I had to prep some barbecue here. Smoked like, I think it was 3 racks of ribs plus an 8-pound pork shoulder. All day long, had to start it on Saturday, finish it on Sunday. So I was cooking for 2 days preparing for this. And then we finally went on vacation. Let's see if this will work for me. No, it will not. I have to click, apparently. So then we got packed up to head on a long road trip with the family. And we went to Las Vegas. And the blazing red color of the doors of this hotel casino in the background, very appropriate because it was 113 Fahrenheit. It was just staggeringly hot. And I'm very familiar with the Las Vegas weather, but this was just scorching. It was hard to think. But very nice hotel. We had a great time, enjoyed the air conditioning, and stayed in our car most of the time. Beautiful hotel. If you went to the Directions NA in Las Vegas, this is the hotel. It was the Red Rock Resort Hotel. That's where I first stayed, so it was very nice. And in Vegas, went to some interesting places. This place called Area 15, really like strange interactive art exhibit and entertainment complex, giant warehouse facility with all sorts of artwork and digital art, digital interactive experience. Never seen anything like it. I don't even know how to describe it. But if you're in Las Vegas, check it out. It's a novel thing. You wouldn't necessarily want to go 2 or 3 times, but really interesting place to go if you're in town. Just staggeringly hot outside, so it was nice to go inside. And for the first time, I did a VR experience, and we played a VR game. It was like an escape room in VR where you're on a spaceship and you work with other people. So it was my entire family in 2 different separate rooms trying to work together to solve a puzzle on a spaceship in order to save ourselves from going into the sun. Pretty crazy experience. But I realized that is what I look like with VR goggles on. And based on that, I don't think I'll ever do that again, because it looks like those scenes where you see a bunch of people with VR goggles on and they look like dorks. It's a very strange experience. And it was kind of glitchy. Let's say this is version 2 of the VR experience. I think we need to get to version 3 or 4 or plus until it becomes viable. I mean, it worked, but it was kind of low resolution relatively and glitchy. They had to reboot the computers or reset something. And interesting novel, but not quite there yet. And then we headed to our final destination, Utah. Absolutely gorgeous. Southern Utah as well, but we ended up in northern Utah, and it was just truly stunning, very, very scenic. And we went to like an 800-acre nature preserve here where they just open a gate as part of the tour, and you literally walk out onto that grassland. And if you look very closely, those are actually people down there, and there are barn swallows flying around, and really cool. And we went tubing on a river in Utah, and the water was staggeringly cold. It was like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and where it's a point where you put your feet in there and it is instantly painful, like speechless. You're speechless how cold it is. It was agonizingly painful, and I now learned we were not safe the way we tubed down the river. It was very unsafe. A few injuries. So I recommend when you do river rafting or tubing, do a tour first. Go with a company to learn how to do things safely. We did not do that. We went with a friend, and it was rather, it was quite a memorable experience. Fortunately, minor injuries. No one was seriously hurt, but I've now learned that was unsafe, and it was packed. There were hundreds of people going down the river. So interesting experience. And if that wasn't enough, the next day we were exhausted, beat up, bruised, and battered. We went on a river rafting trip. Fortunately, this time we did hire a company. We had an excellent pilot at the back there, Callie. She was great. And the river was very calm and very safe. So this was just a leisurely stroll down the river. Actually, tubing sounds like a nice stroll down the river. That was actually pretty scary, whereas the river rafting trip was very, very tame. But that was fun. And then on our way back, we stopped at Vegas again, different hotel with very cool ceilings, so I thought that was neat. And we had to cancel a stop on our trip for various reasons, so we decided to enjoy life back in Vegas, and we had this crazy breakfast. It was free. And so we had the challenge of ordering $100 worth of food while in Vegas, because that was it was complimentary or part of our room. So this is what $97 worth of food looks like in Las Vegas. It was an obscene amount of food, and we had leftovers for 2 days. And then we came home to our 2 adopted cats, and it literally took them over 24 hours for them to get used to us again, because they're both former strays, very, very shy strays. And so they literally hid even after we got home. We had house sitters, but they're very shy cats. But they finally came out and started to relax after 24 hours. And interestingly, our vacation was only 1 time zone over. We went from Los Angeles, California over to Utah, 1 hour difference. Our sleep schedules, our eating schedules, everything totally messed up. And it wasn't just 1 hour off. It was just, we had no idea what time it was, when to get up, when to go to sleep. We were hours off. We drifted over the course of the 2-week vacation. Very surprising. So you'd think 1 hour difference is not that big a deal, but all of us were messed up. And even now that we're back, we're still having to adjust. And so I'm still very, very tired. So that was interesting to learn. It is always surprising just 1 or 2 hours how much that messes up your sleep cycle. And it seems like 3 hours is a little easier because that's a bigger shift and you're more aware of it and you adjust better. But 1 hour is really disruptive. So while on vacation, I attempted to connect to my VPN back to my office to just do a couple things. I had to record a cash receipt from a customer, send out an invoice, 5 minutes, in and out, super easy. I couldn't connect. I connected to the VPN with my VPN client. I entered the 2-factor authentication code, but then it just wouldn't connect. And then I tried on my mobile, my phone, to see if that would work. It didn't work. So PC, my laptop, my phone, it just wouldn't connect. And then it said I'm out of user licenses. So it seemed like it was not killing my session. It was like my login attempts were hanging. Well, so I couldn't connect at all. It's like, okay. So my neighbor who was house sitting our cats, I asked him to come over, give him instructions. He rebooted my VPN appliance here, a not inexpensive Sonic Wall VPN appliance. He rebooted it. Then I couldn't connect at all. It was completely unresponsive after the reboot. I was like, oh, great. And the background is this VPN appliance a couple months ago had a 0-day security vulnerability. So someone, the government, security researcher, whatever, found that this device, the OS running on this device here, had a 0-day security vulnerability, meaning it could be actively exploited to fully compromise the security of the device and access the network that it's connected to. So Sonic Wall recommended literally unplugging the device. There was no way to mitigate this security vulnerability, apparently. So they said, unplug this device immediately. Unplug all of these devices. Like, great. And the US government had security warnings saying this is a vulnerable device. So I unplugged it. A couple weeks later, they had a firmware update. They said, great, apply this firmware update immediately. You're back in business, good to go. So I applied the firmware update. 1 or 2 weeks later, unresponsive. I couldn't connect. I couldn't get to the web management interface. I tried rebooting, called support. They said, okay, well, try rebooting. Did that. Didn't work. Try a safe mode reboot where it reverts to a prior firmware, a base firmware that was presumably good. Nothing. It wouldn't even reboot. It turns out the device was completely bricked. It was dead, unusable, no way to access. It just wouldn't even reboot. So they sent me a replacement, a full-on RMA replacement. Had to send the device back and get a new one. That worked. I updated the firmware, worked fine. A week or two later, a new firmware comes out, and I look at the release notes. Sure enough, prior firmware would cause the unit to fail to reboot. So that initial security fix, that firmware, bricked the devices completely. So I upgraded to this new firmware. Seemed to work fine, all the way up until before July 4th. I then go on vacation, doesn't work. So reboot didn't fix it, multiple reboots. So I had to reboot in safe mode. That actually worked, revert to the prior firmware. I re-downloaded the firmware, re-uploaded the latest firmware, reapplied it, and I'm going to see how long it lasts. But serious QA issues at Sonic Wall. I mean, brick the device, firmware prevents the unit from working, reboot doesn't work at all, completely unresponsive. I had to do a safe mode. It's like, so anyway, I've had enough. Like the one time I go on vacation, I just needed to do 5 minutes of work, couldn't even do that, had to wait 2 weeks till I got back, or a week and a half. It's like I'm just tired of it. So my new question is, can I eliminate my VPN? Can I eliminate my reliance upon on-prem resources? So I need to inventory what on-prem resources do I rely on, and can I go full cloud, full SaaS, full hosted, so that I do not have to deal with VPN or on-prem? And I'm assuming the answer is yes. I just need to figure out what resources do I want to be able to access remotely. And maybe it's only one or two things that I need to move off of my network and get them hosted. And I can still work with everything else on-prem, but if I'm on vacation or remote, I really only need to access these one or two things remotely and get those hosted or SaaSified or whatever. Well, are there any issues with that? And then what is that going to cost? And, if that's $50 a month, maybe that's fine. If it's $250 a month, maybe that's going to be too expensive. And then there's no panacea there, right? I have no illusions that I can move everything to the cloud and everything's going to be perfect. So what new frustrations will I encounter? Just because I host a VM in Azure doesn't mean that my life is, all my remote work life is going to be magically solved. I'm sure I'm going to have new Azure hassles and headaches and billing problems and, new mistakes I'm going to have to learn. So what are those? Who knows? So I'm going to start looking into that because, if I can't rely upon this expensive brick to work, it worked for years just fine up until that 0-day vulnerability. And then firmware updates and Sonic Wall QA, I know from my firewall as well, is indisputably terrible. So they have serious QA issues that are very frustrating. So we'll see. So with that long-winded discussion, I hope you were having a good July, and I hope this was helpful. So enjoy. I'm going to hopefully make it through the day and do some elite pro gaming with my new headset. And this is going to have to, make me at least 20-30% better. Maybe I need a webcam so that other people can see me. It's pretty intimidating. So with that, have a good one. And I will talk to you later.
Good morning, sun.